Okie dokie. So this session's being recorded. Okay, brilliant. So welcome to Teams Education Basic Training. So we're going to move on a little bit this morning from looking at the overview session where we looked at the call features and those kind of things. I'll talk a little bit about calling features, but not in any great detail. And we're going to focus today on the more kind of asynchronous document editing bits of Teams, working with conversations and chats and inside Teams proper. So my name's Nick. I work for a company called Hable, and we have done lots of things for QMUL over the last few months in terms of helping you with Department W, and I'm not quite sure whether that still exists or will exist in some way. But we've been working with you for several months now, nearly a year, in fact. And really simple aim from today's session is that this will help you to support students effectively using Microsoft Teams if you would like to use it. So a simple agenda: what is Teams? What's the guidance around using it? Teams in the classroom, basics, working with files, and a little bit of time for questions at the end if we need them. Okay, so by the end of the session, you will understood the context of Teams, how it works with other systems, how a class team is organized. It's a little bit different from the rest of the teams that you may have used in your kind of normal day-to-day administration and working together with your colleagues' work, but it's not a separate product. Lots of people think that it is a separate thing. It is not. It is just a different type of team, and you can create those yourself. Students may not create teams at the moment, but staff can, and you can make your own class team and invite students to it. We're going to understand how to manage the team, so the basic settings and a few more if we can squeeze those in as well. We're going to look at how to post messages and, crucially, how to make sure that they get to your students or your colleagues, because without that, it's all pretty useless. We're going to look at the different types of posts, announcements and things like that, respond to some posts, so please get involved. And understand how to integrate Teams with QM Plus in a very basic way to start with, but there is some work ongoing around how we can integrate that in a more kind of elegant way, I suppose. We'll also look at files and working on files together. Okay, so first of all, really briefly, and this is a recap from the basic session. What is Teams in education? It has broadly three things. Okay, and most of those things are the same as what you have in the rest of Teams, but they will have a few different tools and a few extras, even to what you can see on the screen here. There have been a couple of extras built in since then, which I'll try and talk about this morning as well. So we have chat and collaboration. This idea that we can talk using chat, which is very much like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. It's designed for quick exchanges, quick file sharing. It's not organized or any of those things. And it's designed quick, ad hoc, time limited. You know, we don't need to spend lots of time for small projects or just social chat. That's absolutely fine. We also have the ability to collaborate on Office documents. So whether that's Word, PowerPoint, Excel, or something else like Visio, or any of those other tools that you may or may not have in your Teams. We can collaborate on them in real time. Teams keeps the history for that, so you don't have to worry about the whole email link backwards and forwards with your initials on, which is pretty old-fashioned these days, but I know lots of people still do it, including me from time to time. So this idea of working on documents together is really important. We have a space for lectures and tutorials. We would call those calls. Microsoft would call that a call or a meeting, but it's an ideal space for a lecture or a tutorial to happen live. Okay, in the overview section, we looked in reasonable detail at the calling features, and I'll talk about a few in some detail in this session, but most of this session will be looking at the rest of Teams and not the calling features. Okay, there's a few that are worth mentioning that are coming up, so I will explain those first. And it's a good place for students to work and research. We have spaces like whiteboarding through OneNote Class Notebook. OneNote Class Notebook is there. If you come to the advanced course, we will cover that then, but it is effectively a tool to do what you would have done on paper. It's a ring binder or a Filofax or whatever, however you want to see it. It does what you did on paper really, really well. Okay, so that's Teams in education. And There is some QM guidance around Teams, which we talked about in the overview session, but that essentially says that you should make sure that the bulk of your work is still on QM+. All right, so anything that's important for your course, anything that means something to your course that is, substantial, still needs to be on QM+. All right, and we talked about those in the slides. We're all there to start with. That's not to say that you can't work on files with your students. That's not to say that you can't store files in the Teams area or communicate with your students, because that's what it's for. But it's very much for the day-to-day working on your course. The more serious materials, assessments, those kinds of things still need to be on QM+. Okay, so let's look at how Teams in Education works. I'm going to share my Teams screen with you to start with, and we'll have a look. There we go. Okay, really basically start with, I'm just going to show you the last of the call features that are coming. It's worth mentioning these because I think this is the last recorded session, so it's worth mentioning what's coming that we know about, because it's slightly different to other sessions that you may have been on. First thing is that, if I just close that, at the moment, there's only one person in the call with me, that's Aggie. Teams has now 3 modes to view your meeting. Gallery, which is up to 9 people on the screen. That's your default view. 9 people will be on video if they have their video turned on. Anybody else will be tiled across the bottom of your screen. We also then have large gallery view, which is in preview at the moment, but it works really, really well. If more than 10 people have their video on, this will not be grayed out. You'll be able to use it, and it will show up to 49 people on the screen. Okay. We also have this thing called Together mode, which is worth experimenting with, and it puts you and perhaps your students or your colleagues into a virtual room together. So it uses the technology that we looked at with background effects to cut you out of your background and stick you into a lecture theatre at the moment, but there will also be coffee shops and boardroom tables and things like that coming in the future. Okay, so that is how that looks at the moment. Coming up in terms of view, there's something very exciting announced this week. Again, using that technology where it cuts you out of the background, if you're presenting a PowerPoint, you can literally overlay yourself and your video over the front of the PowerPoint so that your people you're presenting to don't miss out on seeing you, and they don't have that little window that they have to either move around or close. So you'll be able to overlay yourself on the front of any slideshow, just like they do on sort of professionally produced TV programs and things like that, where they're presenting content. Okay, that is all coming probably around Christmas time 2020, so this year. Okay. Other things that you will notice, meeting notes will disappear, so I would avoid using meeting notes if you can. Okay. In participants, the owner of the call, and we talked about who's an owner last time, and I don't intend to go over that, but if you're the owner of the call, you will see some new tools next to where it says participants. They will be in this space here next to the participants title. Okay, those tools are to download a spreadsheet of who came to your meeting. All right, that spreadsheet is now enhanced with huge amounts of data about who came to your meeting and what they did. So you can see how many times your students spoke, whether they put their hand up or not, how much time they were on video, did they leave early, did they arrive late, all of that kind of stuff is in a spreadsheet that you can download. However, if you meet in your team channel, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, then you don't need to do this, because Class Insights, which is another new product from Microsoft released 2 weeks ago, gives you even more detail than that, and it builds up a picture of each student in your class and how much time they spend in the meeting, doing all those tasks. So it's a very, very simple tool. Okay. The other thing we can do is bulk change permission. If accidentally your students join as presenters or something like that, bulk change their permissions there. There will also be in the next little while, hopefully within the next 2 months, Microsoft call it a hard latch. Initially for students' microphones. So if you've got students who won't turn their microphone off in those sessions, then you can force all of your students to have their microphones turned off and not be allowed to turn them back on until you say. Okay. I believe the same is coming for video later this year or early next year. So that will make things hopefully easier in terms of not allowing participation. There is also what we call view only mode coming to Teams meetings, which makes it a bit more like live events. You don't need extra licenses or extra training to do that, but you send out a different meeting link, and that will allow you to add thousands of people, if you want to, into your meeting as viewers only. They literally watch the stream of your meeting. Okay, so that could be a good way to counter issues that happen inside meetings that are undesirable, perhaps. Okay, so those are the changes that are coming. You will also see a button for breakout rooms, and we have talked about this a little bit. There'll be a button for breakout rooms. I can put a few screenshots of that in the chat so that we can get that published, but they look really good and really comprehensive. They work with the rest of Teams, so they work really nicely. Okay, the other thing that's coming, perhaps not so exciting, is a button where you can react live to what people are saying. So in the chat at the moment, we have reactions where you can react by hovering over. It's my message. I can't react to that. Oh, there we go. You can react there, but you will eventually see a reactions panel at the top of your screen where, as you're speaking, your students can react live to what you're saying. Now, hopefully that will have a switch to turn it off. That's not coming yet, but it is in the pipeline. Okay, so that is the updates that you need to understand the Teams meeting features. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the rest of Teams now, and I'm going to share my Teams window with you. There we go. And we'll start in chat, and you can see that this is my chat area. Very simple. Okay, it is a very simple basic chat area. I can start a new conversation by pressing the pencil and typing in the name of the person who I want to talk to. Okay, chat is great for short-term, ad hoc, small groups, things like that that don't require complex file structures or lots of things to be available. All right, that's what they're good for. If you need more than that, then Teams is the place to be. And I would suggest that this is going to be the place where you need to work with your students most of the time. All right. Now in the chat, I've put a code, but there is only one student, so I will add my student to my team. There we go. Oops. There we go. So these are all my teams here. Okay. And as we said in the introduction, the really important thing to understand about Teams is that they are like rooms. They are very similar to your physical space, whether that's a lecture theatre or a classroom, a breakout space, or whatever works for you in your mind. Teams are very much those things. Okay, imagine them as your physical space. They hold your students, they hold your co-educators or staff or whatever you want to call them inside them. Okay, and I've got one for today called Astrophysics 101, and this is my team. Okay, if you want to come and have a post in here, Aggie, that'd be brilliant. Just come and say hi. This is my team, 23-9 Astrophysics 101. Very, very simple. It holds the people, it does not hold the content. All right. So when we talk about meetings happening in Teams, what we mean is that meetings happen in channels. Work happens in channels. File storage happens in channels. Okay, so the content that you work on happens inside the channel. Okay, that's really important to understand. Channels hold content, teams hold people. Okay, and we can make as many channels as we like, but what's important with a class type of team when you work with your students to know is that the general channel is really, really important. You can see across the top there are loads of extra tools here. Files is there. That's pretty usual, but there's some changes to inside the files area, which I'll show you in a few minutes. There's a class notebook, which is based on OneNote, which gives you a structure for working on things that you maybe once would have worked on paper. And that happens in the advanced session. We look at that in detail. There are assignments, there are grades, and there are insights. Now, use of assignments and grades is not encouraged at the moment. And if you're formally assessing students' work, they are not to be used. But feel free to go and have a little play with them. in my opinion, they're not good enough yet for universities to use. That I work with lots of primary and secondary schools across the world, Spain, as well as the UK, and they love it. They love them. It works really well for them because they're nice and simple, but I don't think they're good enough for HE and FE just yet. But that's not to say they won't be in the future. All right, but your formal assessment and grading needs to happen where it happens at the moment. Insights, though, is a tool which we can look at, which you need to add to your team by pressing the plus sign and searching for insights. Eventually, it will be added by default. And this gives you data about your students. Yes, if you use assignments and grades, it gives you that data too, but that's easily got in other places. Insights also gives you data about how much your students are participating in what's going on. So it gives you the data that you can't get by grading or assignments. Okay, so we'll have a little look at that later on, although the data in there is not going to be great because this is a demo team. Okay, worth looking at. It tells you how much your students post by person, how long they spend doing it, whether they're active, whether they're not active. You know, it might give you an idea of which ones to work with. Okay. So that's my general channel. I can create other channels if I wish. There we go. So I might create a channel for group discussion. That then appears for my students, and that could be a place where I post discussions for them to work on. And that's often what I would do. I would make the general channel a one-way street. So I wouldn't allow my students to post here. I would go to the three dots at the end and I would say manage the channel, and I would say only owners can post messages. All right. And basically that means that only me as the teacher or only my co-teachers can post things in the general channel. That's quite a nice place for it to be because it's quite special. Outside of that, we can have a group discussion channel. It has a posts area, it has a files area, it has note, which is based in OneNote, good for just sort of whiteboarding quickly in your channel or whatever. But I could also make another channel there called Module 1. I'll show that in everyone's list, and that could be me getting ready for our first astrophysics module, and I could put content in there. Again, we could have discussion in there, and you can see how this starts to build up into a place where we can work together. The most important thing that you can do here is to plan how your channels are going to work. And indeed, that's a really important job that you need to get to grips with. How do we make this work? What channels do we need? Do we need to make all of them now? Shall we make some of them later? Shall we remove some of them from our students to start with, as you sort of tuck them away somewhere so they don't get confused? All of that is possible, and I'll show you how to do that in just a sec. You can create 200 channels. I would say less is more. And at the moment, by default, all these channels are available to all of my students, and that's great. But if you wanted to restrict the channel membership to just a subset of people in your team, I could add what's called a private channel. And I do it in the same way as adding a channel, but I change it to private. This comes with a bit of a health warning because, and please experiment with these before you use them live with students or anybody else, because they're not what you think, perhaps. A private channel does just do that. It allows you to create a private space where you and a group of people from within your team can work together. All right. But if your work involves anything other really than file sharing and the odd bit of chat, then private channels is not for you. Okay. Because private channels are difficult to meet in. You can meet right now, but you can't schedule any meetings to happen in private channels. You can't add other content. You can just store files. You can't add apps or information or anything like that to your channels. So just be careful when you create private channels, because you may find you have to go back and undo that. And that's hard. Transferring files and content out of a private channel is very difficult. So experiment with it first and work out whether it's for you or not. So I'm going to cancel that. Okay, so let's look at then how we manage our team. Three dots manages the team, and press manage team, and we have owners and members and guests. Now in the class team where it says owner, that is teacher, educator, whatever, administrator. Members and guests are your students. Okay, very simple. I can search for members on the left and I can add members on the right, whether they are students or teachers. And I don't need to worry if I get that wrong, because I can change who's a student and who's a teacher really easily. So if I wanted Aggie to be a teacher, I would just make her a teacher, and that moves her instantly. She now has all the tools that a teacher has. If I wanted to demote her back to being a student, I can do that quite happily. And it may be that you have PhD students who could run teams, and that's fine. If I want to remove people from my team, I need to press the cross, but they must be members first. All right. If I make myself a member, it will warn me that there needs to be another owner before I can do that. And if I try and delete the team, it will warn me that I need to have another owner. Ideally, 2 owners on a team or more. Okay, so that you don't have to do all the work yourself effectively. Okay. And I can see information about my students here. My students have this mute students box. And what this does effectively is turns off their ability to post messages. Right, so it literally just mutes them. And you can turn that on or off as many times as you like. All right, so it just stops them from being able to post messages. All right, and that might be useful from time to time if you don't want them to post things for a while. Okay. Pending requests will disappear, or it should do. No, there's nothing there. Channels. This is another way to manage and add channels. And I said earlier on that maybe module 1 is not ready yet, or maybe I want to make another channel called module 2. We haven't finished module 1 yet, but I've got it ready. But what I could do is go back into my manage settings, or my team settings, or my channels rather. And here's all my channels. Got group discussion, module 1 and module 2. And it says show for me and show for members. Now at the moment, what I've done is I'm going to show the group discussion for all my students, and I'm going to show module 1 for all my students, but I'm not going to show module 2. I'm going to take that away. And what it does, it pops up exactly as it shows on mine there as a hidden channel. It doesn't stop students from accessing it, but what it does do is sort of guides them along a path where they can, more efficiently get to what they need to. All right, so it's just a way of sort of guiding them away from module 2 because it's not ready yet. Okay, so you can't forcibly kind of hide them, but you can put them in these hidden areas. Okay, and if I want to show that, I would turn that on for my students and me. All right, that shows in the channel list then. Okay, you'll see this little deleted box down here. And if I delete module 2, it goes into the deleted channels box. It's worth mentioning that, yes, I can restore that, but once I have deleted it, all of my conversation disappears. Okay, so the conversation that happens in the channel disappears completely. Okay, the files are available and they are kept for a long period of time after the channel is deleted, so you can get them back, and I can restore that quite happily, puts it back, and there we go. It by default it becomes hidden, and then I can show it again. Only files are restored. Okay, so just be aware of that. So that's channels. Settings. I've picked a theme. This is literally all we can choose in terms of a theme. Nothing more than this. I can upload my own picture if I want to, but this is all I can do. I cannot change anything more about the way that this looks. And that's quite a good thing because we don't want to be sort of messing around with that. Member permissions. They come set so that students can only manage their own stuff. Okay, and the owners can do pretty much anything. If you wanted to, if you're working with a group of adult learners or PhD students and you wanted them to have control, you could tick some of these boxes to give them control, i.e. create channels, delete channels, create private channels, add apps if you want to. All right, but by default, this is what happens. Owners can delete all messages. So if a student posts something inappropriate, you can delete that without fuss. Okay, and members can also delete their messages, and members can edit their messages so they can change the content. Guest permissions. If you invite guests, you'll need to set that, but by default, guest permissions are set reasonably low, really. App mentions, we don't need to use those. Team code, and I've generated one for you to join this team. This is a good way of getting a lot of students into a team quickly. All right, as your IT team work to find a way to integrate Teams with your student information system and therefore create your teams automatically, this is probably the best way to get your students into a team. Send this code to your students by whatever means is useful. They then type this into the join team area and they get access to your team. When you've got enough students in your team, press remove so that nobody else can join. And that's it. Good way of getting hundreds of students into a team rather than you typing all their names in. Okay, very simple. Once I'm done with it, remove the code and that's it. Okay, you can turn the fun stuff on or off, gift stickers and all that stuff. Although these days it is a communication tool in itself, so just leave those on, I would advise. And the rest of it, Class Notebook has no settings here. There will be a couple of settings here, but we'll talk about those in the advanced course. They're not there yet, but there's going to be tighter integration with Teams and OneNote. So there will be some settings here in the future, but not yet. And tags. We'll talk about tags next session as well. So really, the only thing you need to manage in settings is member permissions and a nice picture for your team. Okay, nice and simple. We also have analytics, although I would say this analytics is not as good as the analytics that you get as part of your class team, but it's here if you want to. Shows you who's active. All right. So let's go back to our general channel and look at the posts area first. All right. The posts area is really a kind of cross between using chat and posting on somebody's Facebook wall. Okay, so it's a bit more sort of serious than chat, i.e. a lot of people are going to see it. So it shouldn't be a one-word answer, but it's not quite as formal as sending an email. Okay, so when I choose a new conversation, I can type, "Hi everyone, welcome to the team." But I've made a mistake there because this message is going to go really precisely nowhere, because my students are not going to be hanging around in my team unless they have to. It's like sort of the students are not going to be hanging around in your classroom after you finish your lecture, waiting for you to run next week's lecture. That's not going to happen. So you need to find a way of getting that information to them to say, look, there's something new in the team that you might need to respond to. Okay. So I would go over to the three dots and I can edit my message, or in fact, I'm going to delete it because it's a pretty useless message. So I'll get rid of that and I'll start again. And this time I use the good old fashioned @ symbol and I type @team. I could type @2309 Astrophysics 101, but that's a lot to type. So if I just type team, it knows that I want to reference this team. There we go. There we go. That has a little red badge on the outside and it allows me to notify everyone in my team that something is going on. Your students will get a notification if they've got Teams on their phone, which is a great place to have it. You will get a notification pop up like a normal WhatsApp style message on your phone. On your PC, you'll get a little blue flash in the corner and it will increase your activity by 1 and it will put this little red A next to Teams like that. Okay, so you'll get notified. If they don't do anything with that notification, they'll get an email later in the day saying these are the things you've missed in Teams. Okay, so very simple, really. Okay, but without using @team, nobody in your team will know that you're posting stuff. So get good at tagging. The other one is to reply to one person or to tag one person. Okay, and I just do that again by typing @ and the person's name. All right, it will automatically find people who are in your team and not people who are outside your team. And this is not a way of explaining to Aggie that I'm really upset that she's not been in my lectures, because this is public. But what it is a way of saying, well, Aggie, I think that the rocket section coming up really interests you. So it's a way of kind of picking out information. You think, oh, that student's going to be really interested in that, or they've contributed really well, or, you know, it's for positive statements rather than other things. Use chat if they're not turning up or whatever. That tags Aggie. And I've taken her surname off by backspacing once and making it a little bit less formal. And she will get a notification if she's not already here, and she's here lurking in the background, so that's okay. But all those things that I've just mentioned will happen when I tag her as well. Blue flash, notification on her phone, those kinds of things. Okay, so those are the two most basic and most used ways of getting information to your students: @team, @person. Get good at those and you get good at Teams, really. Okay, other things we can do. If we press the A with the paintbrush, we can change the message type. Oh, let me just start a new conversation instead. A with the paintbrush, and we can change the message type. Just popping that up gives us a more email style conversation, but I can change that to be an announcement. And all that does is gives me a lovely headline. And because you're an education institution, you benefit from the lovely primary school illustrations that come with Teams. So you can make that look really quite smart. There we go. So I could be advertising an event or a deadline or something like that. That just gets your students' attention. And by default, when I send that, all of my students are notified. So you don't even have to use the @ tag in that message. Okay, so there's loads of little things in there. You can post across multiple teams and channels here. So if you taught 3 astronomy sessions, you could post it across 3 channels to save yourself some work. Okay, and we can do lots of other kind of rich text formatting here as well. All right, including adding code snippets and things like that if you teach computer science or anything IT related. Okay, and I can delete that and get rid of that. There we go. Other things I can do, I can attach files. When I attach files to a chat, they don't live in the chat. They have a home, which is files, so they get linked to. So the file is uploaded to files, it gets linked to chat. GIFs, stickers and emojis, all that stuff, and then other apps as well. And we don't have time to look at lots of these, but I have these in my list. You probably won't have this many at the moment. You will need to go to more apps and find the ones that you like. But Forms is a really good one, and it allows you to ask a really quick question in your session. So I could, put a form in, ask a really quick question. It gives me the question in a post and the answer in another post, and allows me to see really quickly who agrees with that statement, who doesn't agree with that statement. Okay, kind of taking the temperature, checking learning, whatever you want to do with it. It's a great way of doing that. Again, there are other tools on the internet, but this one integrates really nicely with Teams. Okay, they are all there in 3 dots, or if you don't see them here, more apps. Okay, including YouTube and all kinds of other stuff. There's loads of really good tools in there that you can use. Okay, so that is posts. Remember, each channel has posts. So I would turn off the ability for students to post in general and allow them to post in the others. But then in each channel, we have a files area. But again, the files area in your class type of team is really important because it has this special folder called class materials. Okay, and class materials is a read-only space for your students. They cannot see what is going on. Sorry, they cannot edit what is going on here. They cannot edit those files. Okay, so you as the teacher, your co-owners of the team can put files here. Your students can see them, copy them to their OneDrive if they wish, but they may not edit them. Okay, that is all they are allowed to do. Okay, so they can see files here, but they can't edit them. All right, that class materials folder only exists in the general channel. Okay, the rest are normal files areas with just a free-for-all area effectively. Okay. Outside of there, we have a nice space to work with our students on documents, on bits of work and those things. If I make myself a new document here, there is a bug here at the moment. I'm hoping it's going to get fixed soon. This says just QMUR document. It's supposed to say Word, PowerPoint, Excel. That will get fixed in the fullness of time, I hope. But if I make myself a new document, if it's outside of class materials, we can all work on this together. So if you want to come and edit this with me, you're very welcome. And we get a blank document. We can also drag and drop documents that we have on our PC or a shared drive and make them collaborative documents just by dragging them here. All right, and I can add content here. As content as much as I like. We can all work together here. Now, lots of people say they don't like the online versions of Word and Excel and PowerPoint, but I think they have a place and they have a use effectively, because what they do really well is manage to allow you to work together in real time. All right, so the ability to work together in real time is really important, but it works well in the online versions. It doesn't work quite so well in the desktop versions. Okay, I'm just going to check chat. Aha. So they work just as well there. Anything outside of class materials is free for all. We can all work on that document together at the same time. Okay, really nice and simple. Okay. I also have some interesting other tools in the Word editor, really basic tools. Dictate works really well. I can talk to my computer and get it to write down what I say. I can use Editor. which is a Grammarly style grammar editor. Really nice tool. If I have students with extra needs or accessibility needs, go to View. Immersive Reader works across the whole of Teams, not just documents. And it takes the content from my document and it allows me to read it.
Add content as AI-like.
There we go. Very bad English. I can increase the text size, the spacing, font, change the color of the background, make it high contrast if I wish. All of that without changing the content of my document. Over here, I can choose to focus on a particular line. Picture dictionary, useful for schools, I guess, not so much for HE and FE, but I can also translate it lock, stock and barrel or by word. Okay, I can see I translated to Arabic, which is a right to left language, and I can have that read to me in that language.
إضافة محتوى مثل أنا.
There we go. Really simple tool, incredibly effective at working with students with extra needs or accessibility needs, or if you just want your work read to you, absolutely fine. So that works really, really well. I can also add comments and do track changes and those kinds of things as well. Okay. So that's files. Remember that the general channel is really important because it holds the class materials file, which is very much a place where it's read-only for students and editable by the teachers in the team. Okay, so we've looked at channels, we've looked at a little bit of management of the team. We've looked at posts, which is a place to talk to your students, post messages or allow them to discuss things. We've looked at files. Now, files is shared across the whole of your teams. Each channel creates a files area, but you share 4 terabytes of data storage. Okay, so 4 terabytes of data storage is what you have in your files area shared across your team, which is absolutely huge. I don't suppose you could ever fill that. So absolutely massive. Okay. Brilliant. Okay, so we're kind of coming to the end, and there's a few more little things I want to tie up before we stop the recording and go our separate ways. Class notebook, we're going to look at that in the advanced session, but effectively this is a place for you to do the things that you would have done on paper. So it's a good place for whiteboarding. It's a good place for getting students to collaborate together. It's a good place for distributing content, whether that's articles or other things that you would have given out on paper. All right, pictures, images, videos, those kinds of things that you maybe would have given out and want to physically give to your students, okay, that don't maybe easily fit into files. So that's Class Notebook, certainly worth using once you've got to grips with Teams. Assignments and grades we're not going to focus on today. As I said, you're welcome to play with them. They are available, but they're not for use in Anger yet, really. The other one is Insights. Now, I've added this to my team by pressing the plus sign. Okay, it's really good to add content, and we can add all kinds of content here. Maybe a form, we want to survey our students. Maybe a YouTube video, we want that to play in a tab rather than going to YouTube. I want to add a website that I always use. Maybe if I was teaching astrophysics, it would be the European Space Agency website or something like that. Another document library, an Excel spreadsheet, all kinds of stuff can be added to your team. And I did that with Insights. Eventually that will be added automatically for you. Okay, but Insights, as I said earlier, gives you this ability, and there's not much data here at the moment, but it gives you this ability to collect data about what your students do and how they use your team. Okay, it does collect data about assignments. If you ever start using assignments properly, it will collect that data, but it focuses mostly on how much interaction students are having in the posts area, how much files are they using, how much time are they spending here, and what times of day are they spending here. So you get a pattern or a picture of how they use this stuff. All right, that's Insights. Okay, and the other thing I want to talk to you about is scheduling your live lessons or your live sessions, your lectures, your whatever. There are lots of ways to do that. Well, there's 2 ways to do that. We talked before about making sure that those lessons in the overview session around making sure that those lessons happened in channels if you can manage it. Okay, and hopefully that's a little bit clearer now, because this meeting here that we're having here is a chat. Okay, because we're from all over the university, this meeting is a chat because we have no common place to go. But your students will, you know, our astrophysics students here, they're all here. They're all working together. So we might as well meet here. Okay, and we can do that. And there are some advantages to doing it. I can either press meet, which literally turns on a meeting right now. My students will be notified that I've started it, but probably not what you want to do day to day. Or I can drop that down and say schedule a meeting. And that takes me to my Teams calendar. I can also access this by going to calendar and just choosing my slot. Okay, same way. And I give it a title. Live lesson 1. And it's already filled in who's coming. Astrophysics General, which means that it's going to invite the rest of the team. Okay, so the rest of the team is going to be invited to that session. Okay, really, really simple. You don't have to type anybody's names in. If you have guest speakers, invite them there. All right, very, very simple. All right, and that's it. Any content appears in the team. You don't have to type in anybody's name. The content gets kept forever. So it's a really win-win scenario. And that's the way that I would suggest setting up your lessons. Now, if you set these up yourself, you get those owner tools. If someone else sets them up for you, then you don't get those owner tools. You join as a presenter. So you have some control over your students, but not a huge amount. Okay, so if you can, schedule them yourself or get someone to schedule it as you whilst you're logged in. Okay, because then it can work better. Okay, so that's how to schedule your live sessions. And again, if I go to calendar, I'll just discard that there, I can do it from here. So I can just say, well, I want to do it for that hour there. And again, there we go. This time, though, I would need to tell it which channel to meet in. Okay, it's a module 1 discussion. There we go. Okay, very simple, but really effective, cuts down your workload and makes sure that all the content that gets saved in the team. Okay, it doesn't get saved anywhere else. So it doesn't clutter up my chat area. It doesn't clutter up anything else. And you can see from the chats that I've got here, all of these are live sessions. If I was actually working at QMUL and delivering live sessions, you know, the chats with actual people would be difficult to find. So it's much nicer to have your live sessions in the channel here. Okay. Last but not least, search, really, really useful for finding anything within Teams. Literally anything at all can be found within Teams. Insides of documents, people, messages, chats, anything at all. Just search and it will find it for you. Up the top here is your settings area. Okay, so at the moment it says I'm presenting because I'm sharing my screen in Teams, but I can change that to be available. This should follow my calendar, but I can update this manually to show my colleagues that I'm actually really busy, so don't disturb me. I can set a status message. I can change my settings. This is where I would turn on the new meeting experience, which is now turned on by default, I think. So just tick that box if it's not already. You can change your notification, your privacy settings, your theme settings. So I can make Teams dark if I wanted to, if I'm in that kind of mood, or high contrast again if I need to. Okay, and I can change my grid view to a list view if I like. Okay, so all of that is up for grabs. Notification settings and everything, all in that little menu at the top. Okay. Great. So I am going to stop there and I'm going to let you go on your way. This video will be shared more widely, so you can watch this back at any time if you would like to. And please do come to the more advanced sessions and any other sessions that get put on because they will update you about Class Notebook and other things in Teams, the more kind of complex features that we can use. And there'll be more, more features coming in the fullness of time as well. Okay, so I am going to stop the recording just there.